Hey Fae folk, welcome back to what I expect to be quite a controversial video. So we're just gonna jump straight on in. I have made no secret on this channel from its inception that I personally am not a fan of Gen 1 Frankie Stein from Monster High. At first, it was purely based off of aesthetics. Like it was just, I didn't really vibe with the designs that they gave her. Sometimes they were better than others, but like aesthetically, I just never really clicked with her Gen 1 designs. And then as I started watching the Monster High media for the first time, because if you haven't like been here before, I never saw any of the Monster High webisodes or movies or anything as a kid. I watched them for the first time as an adult. And then I realized that my dislike for Frankie goes so far beyond just aesthetics, and I actually do not like her as a character, and that's like putting it mildly. I'm trying to be nice, at least for the intro here. And I know that that is a wildly unpopular opinion. Okay. I am fully aware of that fact. I have talked briefly before about why it is that I don't like Gen 1 Frankie. I am specifying Gen 1 because they're actually one of my favorite characters in G3. I just really don't like them in Gen 1. But I've like talked about it in comments a few times or in like premieres. Sometimes I've made like little mentions. Mostly I've discussed it when I was doing my Monster High movie reviews. Like I would talk about why I didn't like Frankie in particular context, but I've never made like a dedicated sit down video discussing all of the reasons why I dislike Frankie so much. And I think it was at the beginning of this year, either like right at the end of last year or right at the beginning of this year. I did do a poll on my community tab to see if you guys would want a dedicated video, and the majority of you said yes. So here we are. Here I am, ready to rant. I'm really afraid this is going to be another long one, but I just want to talk about why I personally don't like Frankie from Gen 1. Now, I need to give like the same disclaimer I give in all of my videos, but I really need y'all to hear this, okay? Like, it is fine if you like Frankie. It is fine if Frankie is your favorite character. It is fine if like they are just your obsession and like you love them, you only collect the dolls. Like that's fine. You are allowed to have a different opinion than me. I just am going to be sharing my personal opinions this video, and you are absolutely free to disagree with me in the comments down below, provided that you can do so like politely and kindly. I would really strongly urge you, like I'm not trying to be an asshole, but if you are someone who doesn't like hearing critique of your favorite characters or doesn't like engaging with content that is negative towards your favorite characters, that's also okay. Just like don't watch the video. Like don't put yourself through that. Don't get yourself all angry and in a tizzy and like upset by the end of it. It's not worth it. If you don't think that you can handle hearing critique, again, that's fine. I'm not judging you if you're that kind of person, because like honestly, I'm that way with some of my favorite characters. I don't really always want to hear them talked down upon. I understand. That's fine. Just click away now, because if you're watching past this point, you are accepting the fact that you're going to hear me shit talk Frankie Stein for X amount of minutes. So just that's the little beware. I do have my phone here. I wrote everything down. I have notes. I came with receipts just because I wanted to make sure I didn't accidentally miss anything. So to start off with, I say like if I'm trying to explain in like the most baseline possible terms why I don't like G1 Frankie, I'll say that I think she's a Mary Sue. And so we are going to kind of structure this video going through the characteristics of a Mary Sue and how I think Frankie does or does not fit into those characteristics. I do have other complaints about her that like sort of tie into that. We're just starting there because that's like, if I need to give a one sentence answer as to why I don't like Frankie, that's why. And so that's where we're going, and we're going to delve deeper and deeper as the video goes on. So I did pull this list from screencraft.org. They made an article in April of 2023 about what is a Mary Sue character. You can find these characteristics across multiple sources. Like they are, I would say, generally agreed upon characteristics. I just want to be open and transparent that that is the source I'm using for like my list of characteristics of a Mary Sue. So let's get into it. I just had an internal debate for like 3 minutes about whether I needed to define what a Mary Sue is, only to realize that I'm literally giving you the characteristics. I'm defining what a Mary Sue is as like the structure for this video. What a great start. Anyway, characteristic number one of a Mary Sue is being a flat and sort of one-note character, really just lacking in dimension and depth. And I will say, I do think this applies to Gen 1 Frankie. I think she's just sort of like generally kind, slightly clumsy, and like she's a helpful person. And that's sort of it, in my opinion. But in all fairness, that's not unique to Frankie in Gen 1. I was very critical of the G1 Monster High media, honestly, almost across the board. There were very few movies that I thought were like even acceptable, just because I do think that the media had a huge problem with all of the characters feeling very one note and flat and not really having a lot of complexity. And then even when they are given complexity, it's like swiftly rewritten and just like forgotten for the next movie. So like, do I think that Frankie falls into this category? Yes. However, that's not unique to her. So like, I'm including it because it is a really defining trait of a Mary Sue, but I do want to try to be fair and like as unbiased as I possibly can be while I'm presenting this information and just say that's 99% of the characters in G1, so that's not necessarily Frankie's fault. The next trait slash traits of a Mary Sue, I think this was listed as 2 traits on the website, but I kind of combined it into one because I do feel like they're very, very related, is being extremely talented and having very few flaws. So I'm actually going to tackle the flaw thing first. I would say that Frankie's flaws are being clumsy and then being naive. And that does really, really bother me because those are quintessential flaws for a Mary Sue, especially being clumsy. With a Mary Sue character, like the critique is often there's no flaw whatsoever. And so the way that people will get around that to be like, oh no, it's not a Mary Sue, I promise. See, my character has a flaw is it's always clumsiness. Like it is so often clumsiness that people default to as being the character's flaw. And it really is only put into that character for the purpose of saying, see, they do have a flaw. You can't possibly call this a Mary Sue because they're clumsy and that's a character flaw. Frankie does have naivety too, which like I honestly think kind of falls into the same category as clumsiness. I feel like it's a fairly common flaw. And the biggest thing that bothers me with these is that these aren't like what I would consider quote unquote bad flaws. They're like not things like being excessively prideful to the point where you can hurt other people, or I'm trying to think of like another flaw off the top of my head. I should have prepared better. Or like being super financially irresponsible. You're constantly in debt. You're constantly having to borrow money from others, not because of like circumstances outside of your fault, but just because you're not doing good with money. Those sorts of things are actual flaws that actually impact a character and the other characters around them. Whereas being clumsy or being naive is honestly mostly seen as sort of sweet, especially in female characters, which like, that's a whole nother side topic that I do not have time to get into, but ew, the idea of being naive being considered like a good or almost desirable flaw for a female character, gross, hate that a lot. But my point is that when you compare clumsiness to other proper faults, it just feels very innocent and silly. And it's not anything that really adds a ton of depth to a character. It's not something that they actually have to necessarily overcome or that's like a huge challenge for them. That's not to say that being clumsy can't be a challenge, okay? Like it absolutely can be, but it's just not on the same level as other things. And then with the naivete, it's like the same way where yes, Frankie is naive, but it's very rarely, if ever, portrayed in a way that's like, oh my God, she's so naive. Like, can she please just get this figured out? Like, no one reacts like that. It's like cute and endearing. And so at that point, to me, that doesn't really feel like a flaw. And then to tackle the other half of this sort of combined point here, being exceptionally talented, despite her flaws, Frankie is really good at almost everything she tries, with the exception of the first Monster High movie, New Ghoul at School, which we are going to be talking about ad nauseum much later in the video. Like I promise I'll get to that. But if you take that out of account, Frankie is good at literally almost everything she tries. Like she's good, she's smart, first of all. That's like a defining characteristic of her is that she is intelligent, so she has book smarts. She's in the fear-leaning squad despite the fact that her limbs fall off, and she is clumsy. So like that clumsiness factor clearly is not preventing her from doing the things that she wants or engaging in activities, even very physical activities. She's also excellent at making friends and interpersonal relationships and resolving conflict, which again kind of goes directly against the idea of her being naive, because like if you're super naive, maybe you're not as socially adept, or maybe you're not as good at solving conflicts because you just don't have a well of experience to draw from. But Frankie is good at those things anyway. So not only is she just like really good at whatever she happens to try in most cases, if not like really good, she's like acceptable at it. You know what I'm saying? But the things that she's good at also directly contradict her flaws. So that's kind of why I boiled this all into one point, because it's like Frankie has flaws, but does she really? And even if you want to consider them flaws, despite the fact that they are consistently shown to not be flaws in the media, are they really bad flaws? Is her life actively harder? Like actively, genuinely harder because she's a little bit naive sometimes? No, because she has a group of friends around her who are happy to help her out. Like, I'm not trying to say that being naive, like in the real world, can't be a problem, but within the context of Frankie and Monster High, being clumsy and being naive to me don't really feel like they're defined or like showed as actual faults. The third point of being a Mary Sue is being really, really beautiful and very desirable. And this is another one that, like, yes, it applies to Frankie, but it also applies to most characters in Monster High because they are designed to sell toys, specifically fashion dolls. Of course, they're going to be pretty. Yes, they're monsters. They're like unconventionally pretty, but like they're still pretty. So this is another one, much like the first point, where it's like, yes, Frankie is beautiful and desirable, but that's everybody. So that doesn't really necessarily count against her. I just had to mention it. This next point, though, I definitely think ties in a lot more to Frankie, and that is being just immediately loved by almost everyone that she meets, having people be very, very drawn towards her, and like everyone just likes her. And before I can get into the like bad aspect of this, I do need to insert a little rant on Frankie's behalf. Actually, again, I'm trying to be semi unbiased, semi balanced here, because a very, very common critique that I see with G1 Frankie is that she's boy crazy, and that's framed in a negative light. And I do think that is vastly unfair. I have talked about this on the channel before, and I'm gonna like try to be quick about it because this isn't really the point of the video. But again, like I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to critique what I'm about to critique without defending her on this point. So just in general, I do think that this sort of ties into like purity culture and the way that men can be interested in so many women and have so many crushes and, you know, be physically intimate with so many women. And that's something that they're praised for. That's like, oh my gosh, good job, dude. Like everybody wants you. Like you're so desirable. That's so sick. You bagged another baddie. But then when women turn around and do it, suddenly it's a problem and you're being called horrible things like slut and whore. I don't even know if I can say those on YouTube. I might have to censor that. Like, I don't know how that would affect my monetization. But you know what I'm saying? Like, if a girl even has like relationships with two guys, for some men, that's too much. And they're like, ew, she's tainted. That's disgusting. And I think it's a really vicious double standard that is violently unfair. And so I do think that that's part of why Frankie gets critiqued for being boy crazy, is because of like the influence of purity culture. I don't care if she has 17 crushes. That's not my problem. You know, like as long as she's not having crushes in the sense of like cheating on anyone, like if she's not dating somebody and then like behind their back being like, oh, I'm flirting with these 4 other men as well, teehee, I'm just so boy crazy, that's different. And that's also not what's happening. Like Frankie just is experiencing these emotions and is having, you know, romantic feelings for multiple different people. And that's fine. She's allowed to do that, and I don't think that it's fair that she's demonized for it. So I did just want to input that here because that is not my complaint whatsoever when I bring up the point of being inherently desirable and attractive to other people. I'm not at all tying that into the fact that Frankie is quote unquote boy crazy, because I think that that's just honestly a really ridiculous sexist accusation. What I am trying to say is that it makes her sort of a Mary Sue, not that she is boy crazy, but that boys tend to be crazy for her. Consulting my little list here, I don't know if Hoodoo counts because she literally created Hoodoo to be in love with her. So like that's sort of a gray area. But outside of Hoodoo, here are a list of all the mansters that like pretty immediately after meeting Frankie are like, yeah, I want to be with this girl. There's Holt Hyde and Jackson Jekyll, Andy Beast, and Nathan Rott. And then again, I don't know how Hoodoo fits in there. And these are really notable because it's not like there's time for these things to develop. Literally first conversation that Frankie has with Nathan Rott, you kind of feel like the vibes. It's like, ooh, we're kind of flirting a little bit. And like, yes, that can happen. Like people can feel kind of an immediate spark, but it is a pattern where men just seem to be falling over themselves for Frankie. Like immediately upon meeting her. And it's not even confined to just like these romantic types of relationships. Again, as I've already referenced and as I'm going to be talking about a lot because it is one of the key things that bothers me about Frankie, she is so, so good, with, again, the exception of New Ghoul at School, at making friends and meeting new people and immediately like being able to get along with them and help them get along with others. Like she's just a person that like no one hates, right? Like outside of active villains in the series, no one just dislikes Frankie. And that is why I feel like she applies to this point in being a Mary Sue, because everyone loves her. Literally everyone. Like sometimes you just don't like someone not because you're evil and they're good. It's just because you don't get along and you don't like their traits. And that's fine and normal. But that's not the case with Frankie. Everyone loves her. Point number 5 is having a tragic or very unique backstory. And this is another one that, like, technically, yeah, you could apply it to Frankie, but even I, in my intense dislike of G1 Frankie, will admit that it is, like, sort of a stretch. She definitely doesn't have the most tragic backstory out of all of the Monster High characters. Like, by far, I don't think it's like the most tragic. That being said, I do think that being created just a couple of weeks ago definitely is a unique backstory. So, like, this applies not to every other character in Monster High, like being pretty does. It does apply to a lot of them, so we'll give her like a half point for this one because she definitely has a unique backstory, but it's not like that crazy. And then the last point, and the point with which I have just so many things to say, is the point of conflict either revolving around the character or being solved by the character. That's like the last point that makes a Mary Sue. And this is the one that I think is like the biggest pitfall for Frankie, and the one that frankly just pisses me off the most. So in order to demonstrate this one, I'm not going to do like a quick little talking point. We're getting in deep with this one. I'm going to be discussing her role in all of the movies. I'm not touching the webisodes just because, like, that's a whole separate can of worms. That's a lot to open up. It's too much for me to get through. And also, the webisodes are so insubstantial, and like, there's really not that much, if any, character growth that we see for any character through the webisodes. So I'm not counting those. I feel like that's sort of its own separate entity. The problem that I have really mainly lies with the movies. So we're going to dissect each movie and talk about Frankie's role in the movie and discuss how I think it fits into her being a Mary Sue who always has the conflict revolving around her, is either always doing the saving or being saved. I am going to be going in reverse order just because, as I've alluded to a few times, I think New Ghoul at School is like genuinely just the worst. I can't believe that was supposed to be Frankie's introduction and like the introduction to Monster High, because clearly the purpose was supposed to be to make me feel for her and like her. But it had very much the opposite intended effect. We will get there, but I'm going in like reverse chronological order here. Also, this is the part where I need to say spoiler warning for literally every single one of the Monster High movies. I'm not going to be getting really, really in depth with them. I'm not going to be doing plot synopsises for each of these movies because this video is already going to be long and I don't want it to be even longer to go through with that. So if you are watching at this point, I am expecting that you at least have a vague knowledge of the different Monster High movies. And like, you sort of will know what I'm talking about. Like, I'll make the points that need to be made, but I'm not reading a plot summary. I just like cannot do all that. This is gonna be way too much. So spoiler alert, if you don't know anything about the movies, you're probably also gonna be a little bit confused, but I'll try to make it as understandable as possible. So we're gonna jump right on in. Again, clarifying, Gen 1 Frankie specifically, so I'm not including the G2 movies, which means that we are starting out with Great Scarrier Reef, which is not a movie about Frankie. Good job. It's a movie about Laguna. It sucks. It was a bad movie, but it does focus on Laguna, and Frankie doesn't really have a titular role, so that's pretty cool. We're off to a good start. Won't last long. In reverse order, the next movie is Boo York, Boo York. Again, not much Frankie in this one. You'll notice that like towards the end of the run of G1 with the movies, Frankie had definitely a lot less influence in the films, which I do think is quite interesting. But yeah, Boo York is very much focused on like Caddy, Cleo, and Deuce. That's sort of the like trio of main characters there. So nothing to complain about so far, which is super duper. Same thing can be said for Haunted, which again is not a movie about Frankie, thank goodness. It's a movie about Spectra, and I actually think it is one of the better Monster High movies. I genuinely enjoyed watching that one, so kudos. And that brings us to Freaky Fusion, which is very, very much a Frankie movie. Frankie is absolutely the star of the show in this film, and like, she plays so many roles throughout the course of the movie. She's sort of the catalyst to the plot because the plot starts when she wants to go back in time to learn more about her grandfather who created Frankenstein. She's Frankenstein's daughter, so she wants to know more about him. A lot of hijinks ensue. Again, I'm not going to get into all of the plot points, but time travel does the time travel thing where like it's not as simple as just going back in time and talking to somebody. In the end, there's a lot of issues. There's like characters who fuse together, and Frankie gets to be the savior. She gets to save the day. She caused the problem, and now she's solving the problem. She is using her last spark to save all of her friends, which is so nice. How lovely of her. And then everyone else gets to turn around and save Frankie. So she not only is like the catalyst and the savior, but also gets to be for a very brief moment the damsel in distress, and like everyone joins together And everyone's just like, wow, we love Frankie so much. And it creates a new spark for her to be able to come back to life. And I just genuinely think it is like the worst case scenario and like worst example of the power of friendship trope. They're literally like, if you've seen Dragon Ball, everyone at Monster High is like loving Frankie so hard, they basically create like a spirit bomb to shock her back to life. It's just so cliche and so much. And what bothers me is that Frankie can't just do one thing in this movie. As I've said, this is like literally Frankie central in this movie. She is every role. She is doing the saving. She is causing problems, but that's not her fault. She's just curious. It's fine because she solves it. So it's fine. And then she gets saved because she's just loved oh so much. And I'm sorry, I just hate it. I really hate it. It really bothers me. And you could be saying, based on what we've seen so far, we've had a movie for Laguna and then like Cleo Deuce Caddy, and then we've had a movie for Spectra. So you might be thinking, oh, well, this is just Frankie's movie. Like each movie sort of focuses on one or a couple of characters. Like this is just Frankie's movie. No, just wait. She gets so many movies. To be fair, the next one, as we're going reverse chronological order, is not a Frankie movie. It's Frights, Camera, Action, and this is definitely a Draculaura-centric movie. Like, slightly Elizabeth, but I would say mostly Draculaura. So again, this one's sort of free from sin in my book, because Frankie's in it, but she doesn't really play a titular role, which I think is better. That brings us to 13 Wishes, and this one really, really does bother me. This movie isn't Frankie's movie. I'll admit that. It's really about like Gigi and Howleen the most, I would say. So why is Frankie just so fucking inserted in this movie? First of all, she's the narrator. There's absolutely no reason for her to be the narrator. I think it makes infinitely more sense for Howleen or Gigi to be the narrator. You could even go with Wisp. That would be very interesting to have a villain narrating the movie. Or Claudine. Claudine's like a huge part of this movie also because her little sister is one of the main characters. Twyla, one of the main character's best friends. All of those are better choices for a narrator, but Frankie gets it because it's Frankie, and we can't have a movie without Frankie. And what bothers me even more is with the plot of 13 Wishes, the whole thing is that Wisp is like trying to corrupt the finders of Gigi's genie lamp, and she's trying to like use them for her own selfish wishes. And Gigi cannot tell the finder about Wisp. That's like one of the genie rules, like something with the magic there. She physically cannot tell, in this case, Howleen, that Wisp exists and that Wisp is trying to use Howleen for evil and is trying to corrupt Howleen. However, she can tell other people because like that's not, it's one of those like little, here's the loophole things. And in thousands of years of being stuck in this situation, Gigi has never once thought, oh, I could just tell literally anybody else about this. She's never had that thought, which I just think is obnoxious to begin with. Like, you're telling me that you have this huge problem that is an enormous part of your life that is like consistently a thing that you have to deal with, that presumably you're ruminating on a lot because you're stuck in a lamp and you can't go anywhere unless someone finds it, at which point the problem becomes much more immediate. You've never once thought about that. Okay, that's fine. But of course Frankie does. Like immediately. To be fair, I think it's operetta. Hold on. Checking my notes. I lied. It wasn't operetta. I don't know why I thought it was operetta. Operetta. Nice. I'm getting heated. You can tell because I can't talk anymore. It is Frankie and Ghoulia. Like Ghoulia is also helping, but Frankie is one of the characters to be like, oh, but Gigi, you can tell us. Like, we can learn about this, and then we can talk to Howleen, and we can help you solve the problem. And it just bothers me because it's not necessary. Why is Frankie the one doing this? Again, it would make infinitely more sense if this was, like, mainly Twyla. Like, Twyla's kind of involved, like, there. She's present. But Twyla is Howleen's best friend. Why would Twyla not be the one to suggest, hey, Gigi, tell me what's going on? Like, clearly there's something up. Especially because Twyla, being the daughter of the boogeyman and like having powers with like shadows, she has sort of a sense of Wisp. Like, it would make so much more sense for Twyla to be the one to get involved. But Frankie has to be special, and Frankie has to be the one who comes up with these novel ideas because she's so smart and she's just so good at these things. And she has to be the one that really like pokes the hole and like does the nudging necessary to let the movie have a happy ending. Like, Frankie saying that is the reason the movie has a happy ending. And it's not like, it just bothers me, A, because again, I think it's a stupid plot point. I think Gigi should have been able to come with that on her own. But B, because Frankie does not need to be the one who gets to say this. She only gets to be the one who gets to say this because she's the main character. And that's a thing that we're going to be circling back to quite frequently. That brings us to Scaris, which is a movie that is mostly about Claudine and Rochelle. But don't worry, Frankie definitely gets her spotlight too. It's not like she is present sort of in the background, which is the case for I think every single movie. Like I think she at least has some on-screen time in every movie, but it's just like in a lot of the ones that I haven't discussed, it's really, really a minor role. Frankie has a slightly more major role in this movie because she is sort of like the voice in Rochelle's ear, being like, not like the guiding spirit for her, but just sort of urging her on. Like Rochelle goes to Scaris and she's sort of like, I can never remember if its name is just Garrett or if it's Garrot or whatever, but I'm just going with Garrett. I do apologize if that's incorrect. She's like, oh, Garrett hasn't written to me for so long. Like he's probably just forgotten about me. There's no point in looking for him. And Frankie's the one being like, no, 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 something might be up. Like you should definitely check in on him. So like Frankie isn't the main character of this movie, but she does still have somewhat of a catalyst presence. She's sort of there in the background, nudging Rochelle towards the actual plot line. But that's not really my problem. My problem is the fact that this movie had a short tacked onto the end of it, which I complained about when I did my movie review for Scaris, because first of all, why? None of the other movies have this, but this one does. Second of all, the screen time definitely could have been used to pad out Scaris more, especially like it still boggles my mind that Katrine Deneuve, who had a doll in the Scaris line, didn't have a single speaking word in the actual Scaris movie. Like that's crazy to me. But of course we had time to give Frankie her short at the end of the movie, because the short is about Frankie accidentally losing Claudine's fashion sketchbook, which is like semi-sentient. It's a whole thing in Scaris. Again, we don't really have to get into that. And it like travels around the world, and her and a bunch of friends have to sort of like globetrot to go find this book. This movie is not even about Frankie, but Frankie gets a short at the end because we cannot have people forgetting that Frankie is the best and main character. Next up, we have to talk about Ghouls Rule, which again is a very, very Frankie-centric movie, and again, not one that I particularly liked for reasons involving and not involving Frankie. Basically, this whole movie is about her discovering like the history and origins of Halloween and like realizing that there's this huge monster and human conflict, and she needs to be the one to solve this. And this bothers me because Jackson Jekyll is right there. And admittedly, he does play a role in the movie. Like, I'm not trying to erase his role in the movie, but like, Frankie didn't need to be there. Frankie did not need to be a part of this. Jackson is literally half human, half monster in the sense that he is, for all intents and purposes, human when he is Jackson. But then he can turn into Holt Hyde when he hears music, and Holt is like much more monstrous. And just the fact that he transforms is sort of a monster thing. So Jackson is literally sitting on the line of this divide. He is literally the perfect person to encapsulate this human versus monster discourse. And again, he is there. He is helping. He is doing that thing. But just imagine how much better of a movie this would have been if it had been focused on him solely, if we didn't have to also have Frankie in the background, because for some reason her being a new monster is like just as important as Jackson being half human, half monster. Okay, sure, that makes sense. Absolutely. And like I understand from a like sort of marketing perspective, they were never going to make a movie with a male character as the main character and like as the focus, the sole focus of the movie, because they're trying to sell the toys, and like generally speaking, male dolls don't get as much attention as female dolls, and so of course they're not going to give the titular role in a movie to a male character. But when you take marketing out of it and you just try to tell a good story, Jackson is the main character, or Jackson should be the main character, because he absolutely is better at navigating this and like has more of a role in navigating this conflict than Frankie ever could. But of course, it's Frankie who ends up being able to try to help humans and monsters get along and helps bridge that gap, because Frankie's just oh so good at that. That's her specialty. She's so good at making people get along. And I have had, I don't even remember which one it was on, because obviously, like I made a lot of movie review videos as I was watching the Monster High movies. So I don't remember if it was on my video about Ghouls Rule or not. And also no hate to like the people who have commented this. Like obviously you're allowed to hold your own opinion. But I have seen some people say that the reason that Frankie is always the one solving the conflicts is because she's so new. So she doesn't have these like ingrained biases in her head. She has a fresh, new perspective. And I definitely understand that to an extent. Like, yes, having someone new look at something can be really helpful. If you're a writer and you're writing something and you've just been like overworking this chapter, say like you're working on a novel and you're writing this chapter and you just keep working and keep working and keep working and you feel like you can't get it right. Sometimes having someone else read the chapter, like someone who has a fresh set of eyes, who hasn't been staring at these words for hours on end, can be so helpful because they have a different perspective and they have a fresh perspective and they can like tell you what's going on and give you some help. That is valid, that's real, and that's true. But I think my problem is that Frankie's new perspective is always the correct perspective. If you are a character who is completely new to the world and whose whole thing is supposed to be that you're like sort of naive and like you're learning things, yeah, sometimes you are going to provide a fresh and new perspective. But sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're going to be dead wrong. Sometimes you're not going to understand the conflict. And I especially think that's true with these like more serious conflicts because like this gets like really sensitive, so I do apologize for that. We're going to get sensitive with another movie too. Don't worry. Because God forbid I don't get really serious in these type of videos. But like with something that has as much history as the history of like humans fearing monsters and wanting to hunt them down, and like there being this very serious, very violent historically. Admittedly, by the time it gets to Ghouls Rule, at least the teenagers are sort of more like playful with it, although there is still definitely some violence involved. So when you're looking at this conflict that is long-standing, historical, and violent, I do think it's a little bit inappropriate to have someone who's been alive for 2 weeks suddenly have the answers to everything. Not to say that she couldn't have important input or that like she couldn't have new ideas, but I do think it's a little bit weird that Frankie is just like this magical savior, almost like the Deus Ex Machina, like the like God figure comes in and it's just like poof, everything's fine. That's what Frankie feels like, because to me, if you like are sitting here being like, ah, yes, Frankie can end like the war between humans and monsters that is like a species war. So like I wouldn't say it's the strongest allegory for racism because there is another one coming up that is it like a flat out allegory for racism. But like having Frankie just be like, ah, yes, I have been born 2 weeks ago. I know how to solve this like hundreds of years long conflict. I think it's weird, especially because she is brand new and she's not like Jackson, where she sort of has a foot in each door, like a foot in each world. It makes sense for him to be the new perspective because he's also new. Like, yeah, he's not 2 weeks new, but he's young. He's a teenager. Like, he has a new, fresh perspective. He is the new generation and he has a foot in both worlds. He's the perfect character for this movie. It bothers me so much that Frankie got all the credit because I just think it makes so much sense for Jackson to be able to bridge this gap and to be able to do these things. Whereas for Frankie, honestly, it sort of feels like if I traveled to Europe, spent a week in Britain, spent a week in Ireland, and then I decided I personally knew exactly how to solve the conflict between those two peoples. That's fucking insane. Like if I say it like that, that's insane because you're looking at me like you're an American who knows very little about the Irish-British conflict. You aren't like, I have both somewhere in my genealogy, but like I'm not inherently Irish or British. I haven't lived or even visited either of those countries. It would be ludicrous of me to go on a week-long trip in each and think that I have the answers. So why is it okay that Frankie does that in Ghouls Rule? I'm sorry, I just, like, you can tell this one really bothers me. And I think it's so much worse because Jackson is right there. Because it's not like they had to come up with a character and Frankie was the best option. Frankie was not the best option. But she still got to play that part. Okay, we're still going. That brings us to Friday Night Frights, which is the Skulltimate Roller Maze movie. I always get like confused with that because in my head I want to call it by the like line name for the dolls, Skulltimate Roller Maze, but it's Friday Night Frights. This is another movie that is not technically Frankie centric. Honestly, this one's sort of hard to pin down who is like the main character. It's very cast based in my opinion. If I had to pin it down, I'd say this is a little bit more Rebecca's movie just because this is sort of like an introduction to her and her story and everything like that. But Frankie is still very, very much a driving force in this film. She does narrate the movie, so there's already that. Literally from the beginning, you're hearing her voice. But like the whole plot line here is that losing Skulltimate Roller Maze loses the school crest, and like it's literally the school spirit. So like the spirit gets sucked out of everybody at Monster High, and it's like this big bad thing. And like if they continue to lose Skulltimate Roller Maze, the school's going to disappear because of a lack of school spirit. But all of the boys on the boys only Skulltimate Roller Maze sport get injured, and so they can't play. And so it's like, oh no, what are we going to do to save our school spirit, our school crest from this opposing school that we have to like go against? That's basically the plotline of the movie. And Frankie is the one who's like, it's okay, guys, we can do it. We can recruit more people. We can get more people here. And so at first she's like basically holding tryouts for the other Mansters who weren't already on the Scream team, which Scream is Skulltimate Roller Maze. But she's the one who's like holding the tryouts. And then when that doesn't go super well and she realizes that Laguna is like good at skating, she's like, hold on, us girly pops could totally do this. And so she's then a driving force in sort of combating with Claude, who at the beginning of the movie is like, no, girls can't play Scream. So she's like, no, we can play Scream. We're going to do this. She gets together an all girls team and, you know, they do the whole thing. They end up winning by the end. And like, admittedly, Frankie isn't the one who like is titular in winning, which is great because I think I would have lost my absolute mind if that was the case. She's not. However, she is the one to like resolve the biggest conflict of the movie, which is the fact that Monster High gets their school crest back, which means that their school is safe, which is wonderful. But the opposing school, it was like Granite City High or something like that, something close. They're all Gargoyles. I couldn't think of the name Gargoyles for a second there, but they're all Gargoyles, and I think it really is Granite City High. They're then in danger of losing their crest because Monster High is going to take it, which means that their school spirit's going to wane, and then their school is in danger. But don't worry, guys. Frankie is here to save the day again, because Frankie's always here to save the day, because no one else in the history of Scream, which again is a long-standing sport. This is not a sport that was invented even a year ago. This is like at least 100 years old, if I recall correctly. No one in the entire history of Scream has thought, hey, maybe we could just like do these roller derby sort of things, like these roller skating obstacle courses, and like have a friendly competition. No, we have to stake our literal school spirit on it. No one has thought that we could be calm about this until precious Frankie. Because Frankie's so perfect and so wonderful and always has the right ideas and always knows how to be the nicest person ever to everyone. I'm sorry, it just pisses me off. Like, again, this is not a Frankie-centric movie, but she is a huge driving force throughout the entire movie. And why is she the only one that sees a problem with this? Especially because there are teachers involved. And I could do a whole nother rant on the fact that the teachers, and especially Mistress Bloodgood, are absolutely, utterly useless in the Monster High media. Like, they functionally aren't there. But especially with this, it's like, okay, I could understand, I could buy that all of the other students are just so used to it being the way things are with Scream that they just like go along with it. They don't really think about not making it be this wildly high stakes thing. You cannot convince me that a group of adults is like, yeah, this is fine. There's no way. There's absolutely no way every teacher and the headmistress or headmaster, I don't know like what Granite City High has, but like all of these people involved, all of these adults involved, just like don't think it's a problem at all until Frankie comes along. And then of course, when Frankie's like, hey, maybe let's not do this, everyone's like, oh my God, what a wonderful idea. Yeah, let's not do this. It's not even like there's pushback because it's tradition or anything. It's just like, oh yeah, wow, the rest of us for at least 100 years have just been fucking stupid. You're the only person who can save us, Frankie. Thank you. I hate it. I hate it so much. Okay, that brings us to Escape from Skull Shores. I'm getting tired. This is another movie that, like, you could definitely argue that there isn't a main character. It is, again, pretty ensemble-based. But if there's a main character, it is Frankie. So the catalyst for the story is that her and her friends are on the way to Great Scarrier Reef to visit Laguna's family, only they end up I almost said shriek wrecked. And then I was like, that's completely unrelated. Don't say that. They end up shipwrecked on an island, and there's a like big bad guy there who is pretending to be good and, pretends he's throwing them like this little party and everything. But really, he is trying to capture a monster that lives on this island, which is Andy Beast. Andy Beast has a beast form and a regular form. So in the beast form, he's like super, super tall and like sort of scary looking. And then in his regular form, he's smaller and he talks normally and like all of that jazz there. So the thing with Andy is that he used to be friends with someone who looked exactly like Frankie and is like low key a little bit obsessed with her. We're not really going to get into that because that's technically a separate issue because it's not Frankie. But the big bad guy, I forgot his name. Heike, I forgot his name. But the bad guy basically sets Frankie up as bait for Andy Beast because, again, he wants to like capture Andy Beast. And so she's taken, so she gets to play sort of the damsel in distress, but that doesn't last long, guys. Don't worry, because he's not a bad guy. He just thinks Frankie's pretty, and she just reminds him of his friend, so it's fine. It's not a big deal. So he like takes care of her in his little treehouse, and they talk, and they're getting along, and they make friends immediately because obviously Frankie can make friends immediately, even though objectively speaking, if you were kidnapped by a man who was obsessed with your lookalike and like had statues all over the island of someone who looks exactly like you, that is terrifying, but not for Frankie because they're friends and it's fine and it's cute and wonderful. So she like doesn't need to be rescued in the sense that she is safe, but her friends, of course, think she needs to be rescued. So they find her and it's all good. And she gets to like halfway fulfill that damsel role. And then immediately she switches it around and she needs to become the savior because they need to save Andy because they can't let him be captured and they want to bring him to Monster High so that he doesn't have to be alone anymore with his weird Frankie lookalike statues. They want him to get to fit in and have friends, and that's wonderful. And I sound like an asshole complaining about this. I'm not complaining that they want to help Andy, although I will stand on the fact that it's weird that he's like that with this girl and like that with Frankie because she looks like this girl. It's weird. But I'm not opposed to helping somebody. Obviously, I'm not opposed to helping someone not be kidnapped. I'm not opposed to helping someone fit in and make friends. It just aggravates me that it has to be Frankie. And then it doesn't even end there because Andy does have some troubles fitting in at Monster High. And then, of course, the bad guy does come to Monster High because he still wants to capture Andy. And so Frankie not only talks Andy down off the ledge, but also the villain has a sidekick named Farnham. Quick editing note, that's actually incorrect. Farnham is the name of the villain that I thought I forgot the name of. So ignore me when I say Farnham. I'm actually talking about Kipling. Kipling is the sidekick. Farnham is the villain. So when I say villain, I mean Farnham. And unfortunately, when I say Farnham, I mean Kipling. I apologize. Who thinks that he can't fit in anywhere because he has elephant ears. And so he just has to serve this villain because what else is he supposed to do? No one cares about him because he's terrible. And Frankie gets to be like, no, bestie, you too can have a place here at Monster High. You can do the right thing. And so the bad guy's defeated and Farnham and Andy both get to join in at Monster High and everyone is friends. Why is it Frankie? Like, I'm not trying to say even that she should never be allowed to be the one who helps bridge these gaps. But it's just exhausting that she's the only one, seemingly, who cares about doing the Monster High thing of helping other people feel accepted and cared for, when every other character ostensibly also believes in that ideal. But Frankie's the only one who actually does it because she's perfect. Then we have Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love, which is also very much a Draculaura movie. Frankie does like have a small role to play, but not enough for me to complain about. So that's nice. Won't last long. That brings us to Fright On, which is another serious one, so be prepared for that. This movie is pretty obviously an allegory for racism, and I think that that makes Frankie's role in it honestly just worse to me. I didn't even realize this when I like originally did my movie review for Fright On. Like, I don't think it clicked in my head, but it has since then, and now it bothers me, so now I have to talk about it. So the central conflict of this movie is between vampires and werewolves, with vampires pretty obviously representing white people and then werewolves pretty obviously representing black people. So there is like some problem with the dedicated vampire school and the dedicated werewolf school, which means that they are all like combining and all of those students are going to come to Monster High. But because there is like this big conflict between the two, like this big, again, historical conflict, because it's a race allegory, they need like help merging and help meshing. And so Headmistress Bloodgood comes to the fear leading squad and is like, hey, you guys seem perfect for the job here. Let's have you take care of this. Let's have you guys be in charge of trying to help these students come together who have a who have a history of race conflict. That's probably a great idea. And everyone's very hesitant about it, which like, that's a different can of worms. I'm not going to get into that. Except for Frankie. Frankie is so excited. So even though she has, again, no real stake in this because she's been alive for 2 weeks and doesn't understand the complexities of the conflict, she's like, oh, no one else wants to like really spearhead this charge. I'll do it. I'm not the fear leading captain or like the head of the fear squad or whatever, but like I will be for now. Like I'm going to be the one who helps these characters mesh together. And like, yes, that is a good heart. I'm not trying to say that it's not, but as we go on, you'll sort of see why I think this is a bigger issue. So Frankie gets started trying to work on this conflict, and I do think that it's important to note that within like the allegory of like the vampires and the werewolves, there's like animosity on both sides. There are people who do things wrong on both sides. However, the werewolves are much, much more negatively stereotyped. They're described as being like animalistic and like all of these really much more negative terms. I feel like the vampires are kind of insulted in a similar way that Frankie has flaws, where it's an insult, but it's not really that bad. Whereas the werewolves are like really put down upon and really called terrible things. And honestly, a lot of the terms used for the werewolves, like being called animalistic, are literal things that were used to like put down Black people historically. And I'm sure in some places still today because we live in a terrible world. Anyway, though, that's not what we're focusing on. So Frankie's trying to make headway. She's working on it. But of course, there is a villain for this movie because like it couldn't just be as simple as that. So it turns out to be the case that Bloodgood ends up being turned to stone because Crabgrass wants there to be basically a race war, which is an insane thing for me to be saying on a doll channel, but here we are. So more plot ensues, and to be absolutely fair, there are other characters who play a role in like resolving the conflict and getting Bloodgood freed from her statue state and like solving the whole movie, right? It's not that Frankie's alone in that, but it is the fact that she's the like primary spearheading source of like the resolution that bothers me. Like, yes, Draculaura and the Wolf family do end up playing a part, but they're so hesitant to do so at the beginning, and they so don't want to, even though it would make infinitely more sense for them to be like the main focus of this movie because Draculaura is a vampire, the Wolf family are werewolves, and also Draculaura is best friends with Claudine and she's dating Claude. Like they both are very intermingled with this conflict. So it would make a lot more sense for them to be more involved, but like Frankie is the driving force. And I just think it's weird. There's not really another way for me to put it. I'm not trying to say that Frankie shouldn't be involved whatsoever. Like I do think it's appropriate that she thinks that the racism is bad and that she wants to solve it. I think it'd be kind of weird if she didn't want to. But the problem is by showing Frankie to be the one who's so excited to end this problem, it makes every other character sort of look a little racist in their hesitancy to get involved with the problem. I will say that like specifically applies to the white-coded characters. I don't feel like as a white person myself, it's really appropriate for me to be like, oh, the wolves should be fighting harder to like end racism. Like I'm sure they're sick of the shit, you know? Like I'm sure that they're tired. And so I'm not trying to be like, oh yeah, the wolves aren't doing enough because that's also a really harmful historical rhetoric. That's not like what I'm trying to get here. I do think they should have played a bigger role story-wise just because I do think they should have had somewhat of a role to begin with. But mainly I'm talking about the white-coded characters. I think it's super, super weird that Frankie, the 2-week-old new white girl, is the only one who seems to really care about ending this racism at first. Again, it does change like towards the end of the movie. Other characters get more involved. But by having the hesitancy at the beginning, I don't think this was the intention. But to me, it makes it come across like all of the other characters are just like, yeah, sometimes people are just racist towards werewolves, but that's fine. It's just sort of a thing. Like, let's not touch it. That's like a really sticky conflict and I don't like it and it makes me uncomfortable, so I don't want to deal with it. And I think that's messed up and gross. And I just think I think this was like a good movie in the sense that I really enjoyed the fact that Monster High cared enough to tackle a race allegory. And I do think that they did it like in a rather good way. I don't remember exactly how my review went for I almost said New Ghoul at School, for Fright On. I don't remember like the details of what I said because it's been a hot minute, but I remember that I thought this was a much better movie than a lot of the other Monster High movies, and I think that they did a decent job of tackling the issue. But just when it comes to Frankie, I think it's really, really weird that she's the one who wants to end racism. Because of course, the ultimate person, the ultimate savior to end racism is a white girl. And that, Fae folk, brings us to the like ultimate issue that I have, which is the beginning of Frankie's story, which is New Ghoul at School. So I'm gonna go really heavy in this one. Get ready, I guess. So the premise to this movie, the introduction to Frankie in Monster High, is that Frankie is fresh. She's been alive for 15 days and it's like her first day at Monster High, and she's trying to use teen magazines to navigate this new world that she's being introduced to. She wants to make friends. That's like her main goal. She like wants to get along with people. She wants to have people to call friends. She wants to have these relationships. And so that's what she's trying to do, and she's using magazine advice to do so. She does sort of on accident end up befriending Claudine and Draculaura, but that's not enough for her. So she's like, I need to join some clubs. And already I have a problem here because the way that she goes about it, I think is just genuinely ridiculous. I fully understand that Frankie is meant to be, again, a naive character. She's brand new to the world. She's inexperienced. She doesn't know how these things work. I can understand her being less emotionally intelligent, even though we see that she immediately after this becomes inordinately emotionally intelligent, but stay focused. I understand that. However, concurrently, she is supposed to be from the get-go very book smart. She is supposed to be logical and she's supposed to have that sort of intelligence. And they are different sorts of intelligence. Emotional intelligence and logic are not the same thing. You can be strong in one and not so strong in the other. So like that's fine. I don't have an issue with that being her character. But the problem is then she goes into these clubs and she does it all willy-nilly in a way that like is not about her not understanding social cues or having emotional intelligence or having experience or being naive. She's just not using logic, which is like the one thing she's supposed to be strong at this point. She goes and she tries to join the swim club, even though she is like an electric powered monster. I'm sorry, but like thinking, or like not even thinking, knowing that getting into water as basically an electrical object is going to make the water electrical and is going to spread that electricity and you're going to electrocute people. That's not an emotional intelligence thing. That's a textbook thing. And that's something that Frankie should have built into her super smart brain. It just is. Like, you can't argue with that. That is not about being naive. That's about a fact. And Frankie would know that fact. I'm sorry. She would know that fact. And it doesn't even stop there. She tries to join the chess club without learning the rules of chess. It wouldn't even be hard for her, okay? The whole point is that she's super smart. She could learn the rules. She could have gone home the first night, read a chess book, learned how to play chess, at least like at a beginner level, right? Like she doesn't have to be a grandmaster, but she could understand the rules of chess and she could go in and join the chess club and be able to join the chess club, but she doesn't do that, which again has nothing to do with being naive. She's literally just being stupid, which she's not supposed to be. That goes against her character. And so she's not trying. She's not using the tools that she does have, the intelligence that she does have. She's just walking in and being like, be friends with me. Teehee, I didn't do anything to try, but like, be friends with me. Oh no, it didn't work. Poor me. I know I probably seem like I'm being an asshole, and maybe I am, but it really, really bothers me because I think the movie wants me to see this and be like, oh my gosh, Frankie is trying. She's like joining all of these different clubs. She's putting in so much effort to try to make friends and it's just not working and she's just having such a hard time. But the fact is she's not putting in that much effort. I'm sorry, but walking into the chess club room is not putting in the fucking effort. Putting in the effort is reading one article on chess so you know at least the basic rules, and then being able to go in and being able to play a basic game and learn more from your companions and like growing friendships that way. Or fucking understanding that you're electrical and you can't get in the water without hurting other people and like deciding to go to a different club because of that. Or maybe just like watching and being like, oh, I'm super interested in swimming. I can't do it safely myself, but like, can you show me how you do this? And then you can get out of the pool and then I can try. Like, she could do this. She could put in effort, but she's not. They want to make it seem like she's putting in effort and trying really hard to make friends, and it just won't work. And poor Frankie. But that's not how I feel, because she's not trying that hard. She is not using the one tool at her disposal that she is supposed to be excellent at, which is her logic and her book smarts. She's refusing to use even that one little bit that she does have. What she wants is to just walk into a room and be loved, like she gets to have happen in all of the other movies. She wants the reward without actually putting in any of the effort. She's like giving the illusion of putting in effort, but she doesn't actually want to try that fucking hard. She just wants to magically have friends. And then it gets worse, because we've already established that she's sort of friends with Claudine and Draculaura. She doesn't go to them to ask for advice. She also ends up like maybe not making friends, but sort of like having a deep conversation with Laguna. Like Frankie's really upset about the fact that all of her tactics aren't working, and like she's trying so hard, allegedly. And Laguna is like, hey, maybe just be yourself. Like, you don't have to try this hard, even though she's not trying that hard. You know what I'm trying to say? But like, just do the things that you are genuinely interested in, and like try to talk to people and be yourself. And that's what's actually going to help you. And Frankie looks at this person, one of the few people who's been kind to her, and goes, no, you're fucking wrong. My magazines didn't say that. You're incorrect. Like, she wants friends so badly. And then the second that she like meets someone who is being genuinely kind to her and trying to help her, she immediately just eschews that advice and assumes that that person is wrong, even though they're one of the few people who is giving her what she apparently wants so badly. And then it gets even worse, because then Frankie tries out for the Fearleading Squad. I don't really have an issue with her being on the Fearleading Squad, but it's the way that she goes about it, because Cleo is the lead of the Fearleading Squad. And in like the early movies and webisodes, Cleo is significantly meaner than she is later on. Like, she's much more of almost a villain rather than kind of just like a slightly bitchy friend. And so Cleo does this whole interview, like is trying to basically look for excuses to not let Frankie onto the squad. And so Frankie lies in the interview and is like, oh yeah, I totally have a boyfriend. It's Deuce. She doesn't know, admittedly, that Deuce is Cleo's boyfriend, and that like blows up immediately in her face, because obviously then Cleo's very upset because she thinks her boyfriend's cheating on her. But it's just the fact that she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to keep lying. I know that Laguna, one of the few people who's been nice to me, told me not to do that, but I'm just going to keep lying. And it's just the fact that she is sitting here making these outrageous claims that are very easy to disprove, and that also have the potential to like cause problems. She's like, no, this is fine. I'm going to lie about this instead of being honest, because I'm not content with the couple of friends I have made. Laguna and Draculaura and Claudine are not good enough for me. I need everyone to like me. That's how it comes across. Like, it really, truly, I feel like I'm crazy. To me, it just comes across like, oh, I have technically 3 people who are like acquaintances slash friends slash we could develop deeper friendships, but that's not good enough. I need more, and I'm going to lie to get there. Admittedly, I might have a bit of a bias here, because I personally don't understand the concept of lying. I think it's the autism. Like, I just don't get it in most cases. And I don't mean like white lies, like being like, you know, like I'm busy this day, surprise, I threw you like a party for your birthday, whatever. Like white lies like that doesn't count, because most of the time I feel like white lies are done for surprises or something, at least the way that I do that. Like, the truth is very rapidly revealed, and it's a lie in pursuit of like making something really special for someone. That's not what I mean when I say lies. I don't like proper lies outside of the context of you need to lie to be safe. If you're like in a dangerous home situation, or like you're just with a dangerous person in general, maybe it's a bad relationship, whatever the case might be, and you're lying because you are in an unsafe space, that is also different, because that's lying to save yourself. And I think that's perfectly fine. But like lying just for the sake of lying, like Frankie is doing, it bothers me, and I don't understand it. And I think it's because I already have such a hard time trying to read between the lines of what people say. Like, the way I'm ranting, I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent, but the way that neurotypical people communicate, where there's like subtext and hidden messages and the body language is important, instead of just fucking saying what you mean, I feel like I'm walking around in a world where everyone is like low-key lying all the time. And it's very, very difficult for me personally to navigate. And so when people are telling even bigger lies, it really, really bothers me, because I'm like, if you just are honest with me, this can be so much easier. Like, if you just tell me what the fuck is actually going on and be truthful with me and blunt with me, then I know what to do, and we can have a conversation, and like I know what's happening. So I will admit that this is like something that I personally am much more sensitive to than other people might be. Other people might see Frankie lying and be like, well, it's not great, but like, it's fine. It is something that really, really bothers me. So just in the interest of, again, trying to be as like balanced as possible. That's my bias. My bias is that I don't like lying in general. I think it's extremely frustrating, and I would rather someone just be an asshole and tell me the truth than lie to me. So like maybe I'm taking this more harshly than I should, but it does bother me. So, as I said, the whole situation sort of blows up. Cleo's mad at Deuce. Cleo's obviously very angry at Frankie. A lot of people are upset with Frankie for like telling this lie. It's not good. Everything is very bad, but Frankie does manage to solve it. And this isn't me hating the fact that the story has a happy ending, but I do hate the way that the happy ending comes about. So there is a singer that everyone's obsessed with who is named Justin Bieber, because this was during the period where Justin Bieber was like height of popularity with tween to teenage girls, right? And so Justin Bieber is like this famous celebrity and everyone loves him and like is totally obsessed with him. And Frankie just so happens to know him through her dad. Her dad is friends with Justin. And so she is able to solve the problem that she created by lying, by, yes, apologizing. I'll give her that. She does apologize to Cleo. But like the big thing that she does is she manages to get Justin Bieber to come and perform for Cleo. I think it's for her birthday or just like for a party. But the point is like she uses her dad's celebrity connections to get out of the trouble she caused. And like I understand that Frankie doesn't technically fit the like definition of a nepo baby, but that's nepo baby behavior. She literally buys her way out of the trouble she caused herself by being a liar, by just happening to know someone famous and by getting them to perform as a favor for her. And it pisses me off because Frankie doesn't have to do any actual work. Yes, she apologizes, but that's it. It's a simple I'm sorry. And like maybe I just am a bad person because I don't feel like I forgive that easily. If you lied to me to the extent that it made me question my husband's like fidelity, I couldn't think of that word. Like if you made me genuinely believe that my husband might be cheating on me and like really messed up my relationship with him for a minute, a little I'm sorry, that's not enough. And the fact that the thing that makes it enough is her engaging in nepo baby behavior and like using her celebrity connections to solve the problem, I just think it's gross because it's not realistic and it's not how problems actually should be solved. The thing should be, hey, I'm sorry, I acted this way because of this. I understand that was like inexcusable anyway, but like that's why I did this. What can I do to try to make it right? What can I do to like amend for my behavior and show you that I really truly have changed and I don't want to be that person anymore? But Frankie's just like, teehee, sorry, here's Justin Bieber. It's fine now, right? And then everyone loves her. And that's how the movie ends. I really need to like highlight the fact that this is the first movie. This is supposed to serve as sort of an introduction to Frankie and the Monster High franchise. And I think the intended purpose was to show it as new girl comes to school, has trouble fitting in, has some mishaps, and it's really sad. And she's like having all these struggles, and it's just really genuinely terrible for her. And we're supposed to feel so much sympathy and just so bad for Frankie, but it like finally gets resolved in the end, and she ends up getting to have all the friends that she wanted through her hard work and her dedication and her smarts, and she's learning to be emotionally intelligent. And I feel like that is the message we are supposed to get. The message I got was new girl comes to school, ignores the advice of the few friends she is able to make, and instead of relying upon them to help her further her emotional intelligence and her social circle, she just keeps lying to the point where she blows up someone else's relationship, and then she solves it because she just so happens to be lucky enough to know a celebrity. And that doesn't make me feel sympathy for her. To me, again, obviously, like, other people probably view this differently because Frankie is a pretty popular character. And I feel like I'm crazy whenever I'm like, yeah, Frankie's kind of a piece of shit. I'm supposed to feel bad for her. I'm supposed to look at her and be like, wow, being new in a new school is really hard. And like, yes, it is, but Frankie doesn't embody that to me. Frankie just embodies to me someone who is very privileged, who is using her connections and doesn't feel like she needs to put in any actual effort or use her actual skills of logic to try to make friends. But she should just be able to walk in and be like, teehee, I'm a liar. I'm dating this boy. Everyone love me. And like, she expects that to work. And it's gross. Like, it's gross behavior to me. And I don't think it's cute. I don't think it's funny. It certainly doesn't like elicit sympathy within me. It made me hate her immediately. Like, first movie, I'm like, I do not like this girl. Like, she doesn't seem like a good person. And then in every other fucking movie, she is subsequently shown to be the best person out of the entire cast. And I just think it's ludicrous and ridiculous and bothersome. I do want to say I understand fully that I'm 27 approaching 28. This movie wasn't made for me. Like, really was not made for me. This was made for tween to teenage people, people who might be experiencing something similar to Frankie. Maybe they're transitioning from like an elementary school to a middle school, or that might be a little bit young, maybe middle school to high school. I don't, know for sure exactly the demographic that was watching this movie. Or maybe they're switching schools or just having trouble fitting in. Like, there are so many things in life that are relatable to the experience Frankie is having, not the way she handles it, but the experience Frankie's having. So I fully get that, like, having watched this as an adult, maybe I'm being harsh, or maybe you could think that I'm being harsh because I'm not experiencing the things in life that Frankie is currently experiencing. My school days are long since past. It's been a long time since I've had that direct experience. So, like, I understand where you could make that argument, but to me, it almost makes it worse because I'm, again, almost 28. I can think critically about this. I can look at Frankie's actions and say, yeah, I feel like that was inappropriate and that was wrong and this is not how this should have been handled. But kids might not see that. So to me, it's like you're presenting this movie to kids who might be going through similar struggles and a similar situation as Frankie. And the message is that you should just like do these things randomly, willy nilly, and like not consult the people who care about you and lie. I think that like the concept of making a movie that is supposed to help the feeling of being brand new feel less daunting, or at least relatable, and make kids not feel like they're alone is a great concept. And there are so many other movies and pieces of media out there that like revolve around this concept because it's something that so many people can relate to. I just think that Frankie's actions don't feel realistic and aren't helpful and like aren't presenting a good message, because every child who's watching this who is like, oh my gosh, I also feel alone, doesn't fucking know Justin Bieber and cannot use him as a way to suddenly gain popularity. It's just not going to happen. And so I just don't think that it's even helpful for the demographic that it is supposed to be made for. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Again, like, I can't turn the clock back and make my brain suddenly 13 again. And I can't feel those feelings the exact way Frankie might be feeling them. But I'm just really not buying that my age is the reason that I think this is a bad movie. So that's all of the media that we were going to cover in today's video. And I think that like the main takeaway here is the reason that Frankie gets all this, the reason that Frankie is the special perfect princess who very rarely does anything wrong, and if she does, it's very quickly rectified, and she stars in so many movies, and even the movies that aren't focused on her, she gets to play an important role in most of them. The reason is that she's the main character. It just is. Like, it's a meta reason. There's no reason in universe for this to be the case. It's just the fact that she's the main character of G1, of Monster High. And I've talked about this before. That's not a good enough reason. If you have a main character who genuinely has special powers or like a special ability or is a special person in whatever way, and they have to be involved in conflict because it like makes sense story-wise and they are inherently involved in it, and yes, they have like friends and an ensemble around them who have different skills who also have to step in and help teach the main character lessons to handle the thing they're forced to be handling, that's different and that's fine. Frankie isn't that. Frankie isn't Percy in the Lightning Thief, right? Like, she's not the titular character for any reason other than she was written that way. She's not going through things that only she can face and only she can handle. We see it perfectly with Fright On and 13 Wishes. She's getting involved in these things that are not about her, but she still has to be the main character because she's the main character of the franchise. And so she just ends up getting written in to be the savior in so many situations. And I just don't think it's a good enough reason. I will say it's not necessarily unique to Frankie in the sense that I personally just think that the Monster High media was poorly written in general. I don't think that she is a uniquely awful character in the sense that she's the only poorly written character. I think it's just not really a franchise that is like that great story-wise. It was made to make dolls, and like all of the movies and everything are made in purpose of selling dolls. And so like It's just not that great. I'm sorry. Like, again, you're allowed to love it. Like, that's fine. But for me, I just don't think it's very well written. And so Frankie is a poorly written character in a poorly written franchise. But because she's the main character, I think it stands out a lot more than other characters also being poorly written. Like, I also think Claude Wolf doesn't have a great character because in some movies he's shown to be this amazing doting boyfriend who just loves Dracula and would do anything for her, and he pays attention to her needs and her wants, and he's wonderful. And then in other movies, he's a misogynist. So, like, he's also very poorly written. But because Frankie's the main character, which means that she has to have a main role in most of the movies and has to be inserted into these situations where she doesn't belong, she takes the brunt of being poorly written in the poorly written franchise. So, like, I can understand why she's like this. I can understand why all of this happens and, like, everything that I just went through. I know why it's written that way. But just because I understand why, I think doesn't make it excusable. And I don't think that it suddenly magically makes Frankie a good character just because there's a meta reason for her being the way she is. So, in short, I don't like Frankie because I think she's a Mary Sue. I think that she is a character who is inexplicably given praise and love and affection despite the fact that she doesn't necessarily earn it. And I think that her flaws are marketed as flaws, but really they're sort of cute and endearing. And actually, she actively goes against her flaws all the time because, again, she's literally perfect. So I just don't like her. Like, from the moment that I watched New Ghoul at School, it really was impossible. And I do also feel like I need to say, like, it's not that I disliked her doll designs, so I was predisposed to disliking her character, because there are other characters that are like the opposite or the inverse. So, like, Spectra. I love Spectra as a doll. I think she's gorgeous. She's one of my favorites. I gush about her constantly on here. I don't particularly like her character. I think for the vast majority of the Gen 1 Monster High media, Spectra was a nuisance at best and, like, a very, very low-key villain at worst. Like, the entire events of Haunted are because she's a gossip who doesn't bother to find out what the truth is. So, like, she's also ticking that box of spreading around lies, which is something I hate. So I know how to feel differently between the designs and the characters. Like, to go the other way, Hoodoo. He got one San Diego Comic-Con doll, and, like, I think calling it a doll is kind of generous. It's, to me, not a good design. But he's, like, my favorite character. I love Hoodoo so much. I think he deserves the world. So again, I can differentiate between character designs and the actual character. So me disliking G1 Frankie's designs is not the reason that I watched New Ghoul at School and hated her. I hated her because of her actions. And, like, from that moment, to me, it only kept getting worse. Like, she just could not claw her way out of the deep dislike that I had developed for her. And actually, it kind of just grew and grew and grew. And now I hate G1 Frankie. So that's it. That's the video. I don't really have, like, a thesis or anything here. I just wanted to lay it all out because, again, disliking G1 Frankie seems to be a really unpopular opinion. And because it's something that I get asked about, because it's something that I end up bringing up decently often, I just wanted to make this video and clear the air and be like, this is why I don't like her. So again, you are obviously free to disagree. Feel free to discuss politely in the comments down below, but, like, please don't be offended by what I've said. It's nothing personal against you. If you love Frankie, if Frankie is your 10,000% favorite character ever, that's fine and we can still be friends. Like, it's still okay. I don't hate you as a person for loving Frankie. I just personally think Frankie is kind of trash. So definitely let me know your opinions in the comments down below. Whether you, like, want to debate, that's, again, totally fine, as we can be respectful. Or if you've, like, seen my points and sort of changed your mind, or if you've also always hated Frankie and you're like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Just would love to hear your opinions, but my throat is dry. I'm really tired of talking, and, like, especially talking about this, I'm so heated, which, like, I do kind of like to rant sometimes, so it's kind of fun, but I'm also tired now. So that's it for me. I think I have officially said everything I need to say on my reasons for disliking G1 Frankie. So thank you for listening. I hope, whether you agreed or not, this was entertaining for you on some level. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys.